Good evening, and welcome to episode 22 of Nightmare Theater, an open book club for nightmares. Tonight we're going to be discussing more, or less common, I should say, nightmare interpretation. These are nightmares that I've heard while reading nightmares from Reddit. They're nightmares that I've seen as comments on my TikTok fairly commonly. And I thought it'd be kind of fun to go into some of those lesser talked about nightmares and try to interpret them in a more formal way. Before we get into the presentation, I did have a couple nightmares this week of my own, and I'd like to share those at the top of the show as usual. So I had a nightmare on Thursday night. I had another one last night, but Thursday night is the main one this week. I was getting chased through a mall, but it was more like a train at the same time. Like, it was sort of the width of the hallway was sort of somewhere between a mall and a train, and it was clear that there were windows to the side and we were moving, but there were like stores in there and everything. It was like kind of a vast space, like a super massive train, I guess. Right, and everyone on the train was considered to be my enemy. And I was sneaking through it, moving from the back to the front as it moved forward, and I was killing my enemies with various garden tools, and they weren't able to even fight back at first, until I got to the end of the train, and after chopping off their heads with hoes and poking their eyes out with pitchforks, everyone turned on me. From all over the train, people started slowly walking over to kill me. They were walking slowly, and they were still unarmed, but they weren't zombies, but they behaved sort of like the slow-moving zombies that you're accustomed to seeing in popular media. And I kind of got backed into this one room at the front of the train, but it was again like a shopping mall, so it was sort of like a store, and I was in the store, desperately trying to kill them all as they were just flooding in slowly, and I killed many of them, but eventually I was overwhelmed. Suddenly, they also had garden tools of their own, and I was stabbed multiple times in various places. I ran back out into the main sort of hallway of the train, which was now nearly empty, except for a few old people who were playing cards, but they didn't seem to care that I was there. And I could feel like I was bleeding out, like there was a lot of blood pouring out of my abdomen, and I could feel that I was becoming weaker. And I was exhausted, and I was afraid because it really felt like I was about to die, and that's when I woke up. And interestingly, when I woke up in real life, I still had that feeling of exhaustion and like I was about to die or pass out, and so it actually made it pretty easy to get back to sleep. So that was kind of an interesting nightmare I had on Thursday night. Never really experienced that sensation of like total like exhaustion, blood loss, even while awake, let alone in a dream. So it was kind of interesting to see that bleed over into reality, no pun intended. Or I guess maybe pun intended slightly. And then I had a nightmare last night where I was in a theater, and there was a guy sort of across from me threatening me with a switchblade. And the entire nightmare was just me not able to pay attention to whatever was happening on stage. It was just... I just needed to avoid whatever was happening with this guy with the switchblade, and I just had my eye on him the entire time, and he had his eye on me. And not really a very fun experience at the theater, just sort of a stressful dream there. But that's it for my nightmares this week. And there'll be some interpretation on those nightmares within the presentation itself, which you'll see as I get into it now. Can you see? Yes, you can. Perfect. All right. So, long-awaited nightmare interpretation 2. I kind of stopped it after 17. Because those were the most common nightmares, but then I added another 13 that I saw come up quite a bit in various places around the internet. So I thought it might be fun to get into some of those. And the first one is fingernails. So this nightmare can have a few different meanings depending on how it manifests in the nightmare. So if you have long fingernails in the nightmare, that could mean that you have a desire to hold on to things in the past, people, relationships, or events. If your fingernails are deformed or ugly, this can be similar to the missing teeth or the being naked nightmare, which you may recall from episode 6. That was a long time ago now, but basically what it means is that you have a feeling of self-image issues or that you lack self-worth. If your fingernails are falling out or broken in the nightmare, that could mean that you feel like you're being forced to let go of the past. So, kind of the opposite of the long fingernail dream, or related to it. Next we have clowns. Now this already actually appears on the dream chart, but there's a few more interpretations than what I had there. So on the dream chart I say that it's sort of another type of imposter nightmare, meaning that you think someone or something around you is not what they seem, or they have malevolent intent towards you. And that certainly is still a very valid interpretation of a clown nightmare. Although, there are other clown nightmares that you could interpret differently. For example, if in the dream you're trying on a clown suit, or you look like a clown, you somehow get a sense of what you look like within the dream, this can mean that you feel like you're being taken advantage of, or that you're embarrassed about something in the waking world. If a clown is chasing you or assaulting you, that could mean that you feel like you're being humiliated in the real world and you're not in control of what's causing the humiliation. So it's happening to you by force. Now, dolls or evil dolls. So we've seen quite a few nightmares about these as we've read our nightmares from Reddit. Nightmares about dolls represent your childhood or past. A nightmare about an evil doll indicates that you have a dark or painful past that you have not yet healed from. A doll in a dream can also be a symbol of isolation or loneliness. And thinking back to some of the doll dreams I remember reading from Reddit, the first interpretation certainly holds true. I haven't added any of these to the dream chart yet, by the way, but I will in the coming days. I'll have to make a second dream chart because that's already super long. Cannibalism in a nightmare can mean many different things depending on how you're perceiving it, whether it's you doing the cannibalizing, you're being cannibalized, or you're witnessing cannibalism. So if it's you doing the cannibalizing, that can mean that you feed off the energy of others, or you're uncomfortable with the amount of power you have over other people. Maybe you're not used to it. If rather than doing the cannibalizing, you are witnessing cannibalism, it could mean that you feel that the actors you're witnessing before you have a bad power dynamic in the real world, or one is taking advantage of the other, or so you believe. And being eaten, so especially in a cannibalistic sense, that could mean that you feel like you have a lack of individuality, or you allow other people to have too much power over you because your identity is weak and you can only understand yourself through them. So it's sort of similar but opposite of you cannibalizing someone in terms of which direction the flow of energy, if you will, in your interactions goes. If rather than being eaten by another person, so you're not being cannibalized, but you're just being eaten by an animal or a monster, that could indicate that you feel suffocated by other people or your responsibilities in general, and people are expecting too much from you, or you feel that way. Eating a baby. So I made a video about this yesterday on TikTok, or 2 days ago? 2 days ago on TikTok, and people loved it. But eating a baby in a nightmare, or even a dream. This is the other interesting thing, is we've encountered a couple of these dreams or nightmares as, we've been reading these nightmares from Reddit. And what's interesting is the baby eating portion of the nightmare is never the part that seems to disturb the dreamer that much. And there's a lot of people who report having even just like dreams where they're eating a baby and they feel completely indifferent to what's happening. That's actually more common, it seems, than having a nightmare where there's sort of a visceral negative reaction to eating a baby. But what it means is that it indicates that a lot of your hard work has gone to waste, or that someone else is taking credit for it. It could also mean that you feel like there's been a waste of labor or effort in general that you feel helpless to prevent. And that's particularly if you feel emotionally disconnected from the gruesome scene, which tends to be the case. And then finally, you can interpret it to be the destruction of innocence, or feeling that you're unable to protect something or someone that cannot protect themselves or itself. Because I think one of the ones we saw was a dream that was mostly about the environment, and there was some garbage monster eating babies. So that was one from Reddit. So, going back and knowing what we now know, reading up on some of this eating a baby interpretation literature, that would indicate that the person probably felt like they weren't capable of helping with the issues of the environment, or possibly global warming. They felt powerless to do anything, and it was something that was in need of their protection, but they were unable to do anything. Zombies. So this was a popular request as well. So this, if you have a nightmare about zombies, my first instinct is that you've been watching a lot of zombie movies, because these aren't something that we would know about without popular culture, right? The way a lot of these other things are based on sort of common fears, or fears that make sense, right? Zombies are something that is sort of manufactured. So I would say, like, first and foremost, if you have a nightmare about zombies, maybe lay off the horror movies. But in addition to that, it could mean that you feel overwhelming stress, or you're under an extreme amount of pressure in the waking world. And again, I feel like I would have to interpret my own nightmare that I just shared at the top of the show of walking through that train, killing people with garden tools. I would have to probably equate that to being a zombie nightmare. Even though they didn't look like zombies, they were just regular people. It was the fact that there were so many of them, and they were just coming towards me slowly, and I couldn't deal with them all. And that checks out for me in terms of feeling of overwhelming stress, or under an extreme amount of pressure in the waking world. As I've mentioned, I think for 3 streams in a row now, like, I'm nearing the end of my PhD. Things aren't quite coming together perfectly just yet, so just trying to make sure that all goes smoothly. So that's, I guess, the pressure aspect. There are a few other minor variations to the zombie nightmare interpretation, though. You believe that the only way out of the terrible situation is through, and you can't avoid the problem. And it also means, if you have a zombie nightmare, it could mean that you ignored a situation that has escalated and is now out of your control. A nightmare about being lost. So this indicates that you feel insecure about new surroundings or unfamiliar situations, perhaps unsurprisingly, or you feel unsure about how to deal with a new situation. You have a problem that you can't... Sorry. I could smell smoke, and I was just seeing if my candle went out for no reason, which it seems to have done. Oh, I guess because the vents just came on. Sorry. You have a problem that you can't think of a solution to, or there's no solution to it. It could be because you could be unprepared for something that you know is soon to come. You've lost your sense of purpose. It could also mean that you've lost something important, or that you feel you need a rest. The location in which you're lost might also be a clue as to what you feel uncertain about. And it should also be noted that if in the dream you're specifically trying to find a way home, that could mean that you're facing up to making a difficult decision in your life, which may partially define who you are and how you see yourself. And just one more note about the second last comment. So the location in which you're lost might be a clue as to what you feel uncertain about. So, for example, if you get lost in a mall, I had this, as an example, like somebody asked me specifically, what does it mean if I'm lost in a mall? Well, I would suggest that you have to go through that and unpack what the mall might represent. It might represent you feel uncertain about getting back to a mall because, they're all still closed or in certain parts of the world for, lockdowns and whatnot. It could, be like a distrust of capitalism or something of that nature, like whatever else a mall might represent. Maybe you liked the mall, maybe you didn't like the mall, that type of thing. These are the types of things that you need to look into because there isn't really a set interpretation for a mall for everyone, right? Creepy old woman. Speaking of not having a set interpretation, this is a trope in nightmares that we see come up a lot, and yet it really has a very poor focus on what this nightmare means. Like if you look it up on the internet, you're going to see a million different interpretations ranging from things like you don't have enough privacy, but a lot of them do seem to be about having a feeling of insecurity, specifically with your financial and career life. Like maybe you feel lost in what you're doing or want to do. And then finally, it could also be a fear of the passage of time or of getting older. This is one that we saw a couple times on Reddit, so being unable to see or having your vision fade. If you become blind or lose your sight, or if your vision is going fuzzy or blurry in your dream, this can represent a loss of intuition or logic in everyday living. The dream can also show that you've lost something that's important to you, due to being too scared to actually go for it, or that you're trying to ignore something that's very obviously wrong for you. And in the dream, try to pay attention. If you notice that your vision's fading or blurring, try to pay attention to what's being blurred or what you think is being blurred or the circumstances under which it happens. Because if you block something out consciously, maybe your subconscious is picking up on that. Being puppeted. So these dreams, I said being puppeted, but really the type of nightmare is one where you don't have control over your own bodily movements. And that can be, represented by you being on literal marionette strings, or it can just be you're just sort of sitting in your head as your body moves you through the dream. And these dreams indicate that you feel that you're being manipulated by someone, or you are not living the life that you'd wanted to live. You're behaving in a way that's uncharacteristic of you in the real world, possibly in the real world, or possibly in the dream. Your subconscious wants you to see something that you would never put yourself in a position to see in the real world. So if you're being guided to some realization by your subconscious, and maybe the only way it can justify that in the dream is to take away control of your body. And if this second one is true, then pay close attention to what happens next and what your body leads you to in the dream, because that will play a major role in the interpretation. These dreams also include dreams where your body is just moving on its own. I already said that. Statues. So we had not too many of these about statues, but I thought it was interesting when they did come up in one of the nightmares that we read, so I wanted to include it. So statues in a dream represent something in yourself or in your life that you idealize or admire. You could be putting yourself, another person, or someone in your life on a pedestal. A statue could also represent vanity or narcissism. And another interpretation, particularly if there are many of them and they seem to be watching you, is it could be a fear of judgment from others who you think are above you. So a fear of being judged negatively by your superiors, or a fear of being watched and not having any privacy. And finally, being forced to watch, this trope in a nightmare. I noticed this actually when I was interviewing AOS Chaos. Check out that interview on my channel. She's someone with nightmare disorder who I interviewed a few weeks ago. And she had a lot of dreams where she was forced to watch certain things. Maybe only one that I can remember, but for some reason I feel like I remember it being multiple dreams. And I've had dreams like this myself, but not too difficult of an interpretation here. So generally these are about a feeling of helplessness. So whatever you're forced to watch is whatever you're concerned about, but the fact that you're being forced to watch it specifically indicates that you feel helpless to prevent it. And to correct for this, you should try to take action in the real world and make a difference, even if it seems like an insurmountable change. So that's going to do it for this week's presentation. Am I still going? Perfect. Oh, hey Lou. Everything will be okay. I've had statue dreams. That doesn't sound quite right. LOL. Well, what do you think your statue dreams were about? I'll let you think about that while I read some nightmares from Reddit. This is a post by a user named Boss Chebol. I might be pronouncing that wrong. The post is titled, "I killed my friends." The post reads, "This was this morning, and it was a short one. I was in a level of a video game I used to play. A door was half-baked, barricaded with planks, and there was still little room between the planks. I shot a friend in the knee. He asked me to let them help me. I shot him in the head. There was another friend's when I kicked some planks down. I didn't want to do it, but while he was still begging, I just shot him right in the head, like an assassin from the other side of the room. I hated myself when I got up. It was really terrible. I even still feel quite sad about it. They're the best mates I can imagine. I almost have a feeling like I must apologize to them. Quite weird. Anyway, hopefully I get some sweeter dreams tonight." Well, I mean, that's certainly checks in with sort of the standard interpretation of being the aggressor nightmare, forethought from the bottom here. So you have feelings of guilt or being afraid about getting caught with something you're hiding. So in this case, it seems more to be like a feeling of guilt. Not entirely sure what is represented by you shooting them in the head, but it could be something along the lines of, he's still begging you to stop, and you're shooting your friend in the head. It could be something along the lines of you feel like you're outgrowing your friends, or you're moving in different directions in life, and they want you to hang out more than you're available, right? That could be a source of the feeling of guilt. But whatever it is, you don't want to do it to them, but you feel like you have to, right? Because you mentioned that, you specifically mentioned that you didn't want to, but you still felt guilty about it afterwards. So you're making a decision in the real world that's affecting your friends somewhat negatively, at least from their perspective. And, from there, it just you feel like rotten for doing it, or you feel guilty for doing it, but you just kind of have to. You have to like move on to whatever the next, stage in your life is, or whatever other way you might feel like you're letting them down, but you're still proceeding with it. Not putting myself on a pedestal, as you will know, but being judged. The fact the statues stand in a circle above me and close me in. Oh, you've had statue nightmares, eh? Interesting. Yeah, that definitely sounds intimidating. Whoops. This is a post by a user named Joel EVP. The post is titled, "Nightmare that is still having a physical effect on me. Trigger warning for the whole phobia, perhaps, and gore." I believe the whole phobia is called trypophobia or something of that nature. The post reads, "It starts out with me waking up. I've been dead or unmoving for a long time, so I know I'm dead. I also notice that I'm naked, or at least not wearing anything on top. And on my chest, I notice some plants growing from me, between the breasts, like rooted into me. They are maybe a hand span tall, not leafy. They have little white flowers on them where leaves would normally grow, and their stalks, stems are thick, maybe half a centimeter. I appear to be ready to get up again from being dead so long, and I freak out a little when I see these bright green stems against my dead-looking skin. I pull one out, and my skin pinches up, and that's how I know they're rooted in me. It releases. And not too much damage is done. There's a bit of a hole and a bit of blood. I see the next one, and it seems older because it's thicker. I pull on that, and the roots are a lot deeper. The skin pinches up and tears, and the roots are attached to a sliver of my meat. And I see that moves so clearly, and the color of it so clearly, and the damage is massive. There's a lot of blood, and I see a hole that is present, and I panic and wake up. I think it freaked me out so much I woke up. I have goose flesh and shivers just writing this out. I didn't have anywhere else to get it out. These images are sticking with me, and I have trouble processing it. Never heard someone refer to goosebumps, as I know them, as being goose flesh. It's a much more nightmare-appropriate term. My first thought, actually, when I was reading this, I had two thoughts, but I'll start with one. The one that I think is probably more interesting, and that's that you feel that you are maybe getting rid of some deep-rooted beliefs that you have. Just things that are beliefs about the world or structures around which you've built your life, or perhaps even a career, something that you've put a lot of effort into that's somewhat become a part of you, and now you feel like, oh, this isn't supposed to be here, or maybe this is even killing me. Like maybe the tree itself is the cause for your ashy or like ashen skin, like gray, I think you described it, right? So wouldn't that be interesting if you had these sort of beliefs that you had to sort of get rid of, but they're actually hurting you to get rid of them, because not only was your time wasted in the pursuit of them, but they've almost become a part of your identity. That's sort of the first thought that I got from this. The second thought was it could just be a fear of death. That's just a more simple interpretation, right? Like you're just imagining what it would be like to wake up as a corpse, and obviously that's not quite how rotting works, but it's, sort of maybe like an artist's abstract interpretation of rotting, right? Just kind of becoming the earth again and then just having things grow from you. So that's like a simpler interpretation. We could look at the dream chart as well real quick, just at death. So there are big changes in your life and you're not in control. That's what the internet would say about that, essentially. Excuse me. But I mean, even that interpretation is consistent with my first theory about it being related to whenever I said it first. Yeah, just uprooting kind of deeply held beliefs or systems that you had relied on for a long time. I think that the death is consistent with my first theory, so hopefully you got something out of that interpretation. They literally stonewall me, the statues. Yeah, they'll do that if they close in. This is a post by a user named Carnelian Rocks. The post is titled, "Who's there?" The post reads, "I woke up in my bed and could feel weight of something near me. I searched through the sheets without opening my eyes. I found a hand. I put my hands around it, turning it one way, then the other, and called out, 'Who are you?' I fell back asleep. I woke up, felt weight, found the hand and called out. This time I noticed it was cold and big like a man's hand. The body was responsive. No verbal response. I fell asleep, woke up, found the strange hand. This time they grabbed my hand and softly spoke. The voice was strange. I started screaming, no. I fell asleep, woke up. My hand was being held, and I was filled with terror. Who are you? I like that nightmare. First of all, that's definitely, you would call that a false awakening loop, when within your dream you continually wake up, fall back asleep, and wake up, and you're still in the dream the entire time. So that would be a loop of false awakenings. Once again, first thoughts, I like to get those out of the way before I really kind of dive into a more detailed analysis. My first thought is, it reminds me of this one time. I guess I must have been sleepwalking technically, but I fell asleep with my arm out. I think it was my right arm. I just kind of fell asleep. I was on my back, and my arm was just up in the air. And the only reason I know that is because the second I woke up, it like fell and just kind of collapsed onto my forehead. And of course it had no feeling in it because it had been upright and all the blood drained out of it. And it just freaked me out, like just waking up to have something smack me in the head. And my theory there about what happened is that, obviously if I moved my arm up, it must have been while I was in deep sleep. But then my theory is that the REM cycle began the REM phase of the sleep cycle began while my arm was in the air and my brain, engaged motor atonia as it does in REM sleep. So I think that my arm was actually paralyzed in the air. Then when I woke up, the atonia was released and I could move again, and my arm smacked me in the head. But that was actually not the story that I meant to tell. The other story I meant to tell was, I fell asleep like this one time. I fell asleep like this, and throughout the night, this arm kind of came down, but this arm stayed up. And the same thing happened where the blood came out of my hand. And so I woke up and I was like, this doesn't feel like my pillow. Like, oh my God, there's a hand grabbing the back of my head. And I panicked and I just pulled it out, and it was attached to me, but it didn't feel like my hand, right? Because the blood had all drained out of it once again, and it just felt like a hand, grabbing the back of my head as I woke up. Again, not really a very good interpretation for you, so let's try to do that now. And I already can tell that I'm not going to be able to interpret this one, but it's just a very interesting dream. I wonder if it is sleep paralysis, because it could be a hypnagogic hallucination, like you're hallucinating the kinesthetic sense of the hand being there, and then later the audio. In that case, you would literally be waking up and falling asleep, though. Then it wouldn't be a false awakening. It also kind of sounds like maybe a fear of a stalker or something of that nature, right? Like you've got someone just in your bed who you don't know who they are. And did they say, no, you don't mention what the voice was or what they said. That's a very interesting dream, though. I can see it, as being part of a horror movie, and just the way they would set up the shots for that, that type of thing. Sorry, I can't be of much more help than that, but interesting nightmare. Oops. This is a post by Complete Nose 5639. The post is titled, "Never had a nightmare before, just weird dreams until now." The post reads, "I don't remember much, but this was what mostly happened. In it, I was signing up for a writing contest, and then there were two girls calling me rude things, so I called them fat and other insults. I saw my classmate signing up, but she didn't look at me at all, I think. I saw my dad's car and then got in. In the front of the car was him with this weird person. I was in the second row of the car while they were in the front. but it changed discreetly now, and the weird person was in the back together with me being on the right and him being on the left. Note that in the side of him was a bat. He started touching my leg, and so in response I made sounds like screaming and stuff. Most of the fight scene was pretty vivid, but I know I grabbed his bat and hit his head. He kept passing out and waking up, so I had to hit him often. My dad said that we were going somewhere, and when he arrived, the dude started drinking rubbing alcohol and began pulling out his guts. I closed my eyes, and then he forced me to open, and that was when I woke up at 4-something a.m. Wow. Dad said we were going somewhere. I wonder if your dad has a friend in real life that you're not comfortable around. Or maybe it could be in general that you feel like your dad makes poor decisions that lead you into danger. The first part of the dream, signing up for a writing contest, your friend ignored you. Maybe that feels like you think that they're not really a good friend. You know, they don't really have your best interest in mind. You're standing up for yourself when the girls are calling you rude things, but it does seem like the general sense of the first part of the nightmare is a feeling of being an outcast. That's how I would interpret that, because you've got the girls being rude, and then you've got your friend kind of ignoring you. And then it seems like your dad doesn't really care about this guy being inappropriate, and you're having to kind of fight him off. So it sounds certainly like you're, strong in like dealing with situations that come up in your life, but it sounds like you feel like maybe you don't have a lot of help in doing so, and maybe you don't have much guidance or many friends that have your back as you deal with problems in the real world. And then the last part, the dude started drinking rubbing alcohol and pulling out his guts. I mean, that's not something that I really have the capacity to interpret. But best of luck with that last part. And I hope that you got something out of my interpretation of the first part. This is a post by a user named Theorlugoon. The post is titled Screaming Human Sausages. The post reads, I dreamt that in the far, far future, dumb humans would be converted into sausages and then eaten. Weirdly enough, the little human sausages still had faces, red and bloody faces, and they were screaming as you ate them. Everyone was a cannibal. I literally don't eat sausages anymore. That really scared me. Well, it's a good thing that we just did that cannibal interpretation in the presentation. So the way I would interpret that, based on what we talked about in the presentation, is maybe you feel like in the future the power dynamics are going to be off, which is a common trope in sci-fi, right? Like the corporations or the government is like supremely powerful, and there's just a wider sort of class disparity, not sure what the word is, but just there's more, people are less equal, people have less rights, and there's sort of like a class divide, a greater class divide going on. Again, kind of a popular trope in sci-fi, and it maybe could be what you're seeing here too. And even if I hadn't read that cannibal thing in the presentation, I would still probably interpret it this way, right? Because you're saying literally that the dumb humans are converted into sausages and eaten. So, yeah, interesting. The end. I think I forgot to read that part. Good end. Good end. This is a post by a user named Christian1121. The post is titled, The Nightmare That Has Made Me Afraid to Sleep. The post reads, made an account to share this. I've been having these kinds of nightmares for the past week, and as I'm posting this, trying to stay awake because I fear sleeping now. Last night, there was a monster. He was a fly-looking monster. I can't remember his name, but everyone in the dream seemed to put up with him. Not that they were friends with him. He betrayed everyone who put up with him, and he was exiled. After a while, he came back, apologizing and wanting everyone to trust him, and trust that he could add something to their lives and the rest of the world. Most of them believed him and accepted him back, but there were some that distrusted him. I remember hearing, just because you say sorry for something doesn't mean people have to forgive you. After some time passed and he gained the trust and forgiveness he wanted, he committed the ultimate act of betrayal. He went to a volcano and blew himself up, causing the volcano to erupt, combing the earth maybe in a black smoke that would kill everyone. At the end, it seemed like it was a Twilight Zone episode, as someone would narrate the end and even set up a continuation. Name was a touchy person and wanted the trust of people around him after he'd done wrong. His actions a tragic reality that you never know when someone is truly sorry for what they've done, and they can't be trusted, as people of Earth found out. My hands are shaking, and I'm feeling scared again just explaining that. I think I'm most scared of the fact that the fly monster might be me. That's certainly a very interesting twist at the end there. Kind of throws off some of the stuff I was going to say. I was going to say initially, it seems like there's someone in your life that you don't trust, but clearly that's not the case. Sounds like you don't trust yourself. I think I can also classify this as an apocalypse nightmare, though. So, as you can see up kind of second from the top, apocalypse dreams indicate that there's a big change happening in your life. So that's somewhat congruent with the idea that maybe you're afraid or feel guilty that you might be betraying people. I would actually interpret this in a similar way to the one that I read at the beginning about the fellow who felt that he was murdering his friends and he felt guilty about it, but he continued to do it. I would probably put that in the same category as that. I feel like maybe as you move up in the world, or as you move from situation to situation, doing things differently, maybe you're ending up feeling like you're disappointing people or letting them down, maybe because you're focusing more on yourself. You're moving on to greater things and you're neglecting some of the people that were with you in the beginning, or something of that nature. That would be my interpretation of that. Do what you will with that interpretation. Whoops. This is a post by a user named _breezy_G. The post is titled "So Many Nightmares." The post reads, "In the past 2 nights, technically mornings, I've had 6 nightmares. I probably have at least 1 nightmare a month, so 6 in the past 2 nights seems like a lot. 1 month may even be a lot, I don't know. Anyway, they're always the same type as well, always being chased or followed. Not looking for suggestions or interpretations or anything, I've already Googled, but has anyone else had the same frequency of nightmares, because this does not feel normal to me. I do have anxiety and depression. Likes to rear its ugly head once in a while, but I choose not to medicate because it's not as bad as it used to be." So we won't interpret this for his sake, but of course we'll interpret it for our audience here. So a dream where you're being chased and attacked. As you can see kind of around the middle, it indicates that you're avoiding some confrontation in real life from either another person or situation. And Well, attacked is kind of a separate one. It just means that you feel out of control or vulnerable in some aspect of your life. And the fact that this individual is experiencing these in rapid succession over the last 2 days means that there is probably some real world trigger for it, right? That's all we really need to say, especially since, they're not going to be reading this or listening to this. I love that nightmare. My mic is... Oh dear. That's not good. Oh yeah. I don't know, yeah, I'm actually getting like an error message saying that my audio is not good. How's my internet? Oh, it's the music. Okay. All right, okay. Did you hear that nightmare? That was a really good one. Oh, where did I just... Anyway, so my first thought reading that nightmare is it kind of reminds me of the game Bloodborne, because it's kind of a Lovecraftian alien, right, with tentacles, and it's coming out of the sky, and everyone's sort of, turning like mad because, what did they call it in Bloodborne? Like the people are drinking like the blood of the aliens in order to heal themselves. I forget what it's called. They had a cool name for it that I wish I was remembering right now. Okay, it fixed when my music turned off. Oh, you didn't hear the nightmare. Okay, I gotta read this one again because it's a really good one. And I guess I'll keep the audio off, or the music off. So this is a post by a user named Cole_Doe. The post is titled, "Had a nightmare where a tentacle monster came from the sky." The post reads, "I suffer with nightmares almost every night, so I've gotten used to them for the most part, but sometimes there are ones that really shake me up. Last night, in my nightmare, I woke up to my mom shaking me. She was frantic and saying, 'You need to get up. The National Guard are here, and they're telling everyone to pack up.' Scared, I sat up really quick and got clothes on before grabbing some clothes to pack up and other essentials. We had cages for our pets and packed everything in the car as quickly as we could. Outside, there were National Guard at everyone's door, at everyone's house, making sure they got everyone ready. When I looked up at the sky, the clouds were thick, light, and dark at the same time, and there was a slight green tint. I could hear the tornado alarms going off everywhere around me. It felt way too real. I don't know how to describe it, but the panic and fear was so real. I honestly couldn't tell if I was awake or not. Anyways, the National Guard told us that when we were ready, they'd escort us to safety. When we all got in our cars, they let everyone through and out of town. As we rode through town, we saw weird, fleshy spider things attacking people. We also saw people attacking people, as if they were in a trance and couldn't control what they were doing. We were all freaking out, and I was almost on the verge of tears. We just got out of the town. I looked back at the clouds and saw huge grayish tentacles slowly emerging from the clouds and making their way toward the town. Then I woke up. Yeah, so I think that's really cool. At first I compared it to Bloodborne. The Old Blood? Is that what it's called? In Bloodborne? But it also is actually reminding me of Heart of the Swarm, StarCraft 2. I think it's called the Leviathan, that the Zerg, it's like a flesh-bound spaceship that the Zerg use to transport themselves, and then the Zerglings, I guess, could be like the fleshy spider creatures. Yeah, but just really, really cool imagery in that nightmare. Just really powerful, like, things pouring out of the sky and aliens and whatnot. I'll just leave the audio as it is. I won't use the music for the rest of the stream, and I'll work on that later. This is a post by a user named Night Mikes. The post is titled Takeout. The post reads, Nightmare. I was with my family and a gorilla was stalking us. No joke. Pretty scary. And we went outside. We wanted to go to the store, but we stopped at a shack a street away from the woods. We went inside. I don't know why. And we looked outside the window. We saw the gorilla across the street. The lights went out, and it was turning night fast. We then hid, and then the gorilla broke in. We were scared, and I blacked out. After I woke up, my family was gone. They were dead on the floor. I stood up and thought something was missing. In my body, I was feeling dizzy, like I just drank blood. I put my hands where my ribs were, and I thought they would be gashed. But there was a little hole. I put my hand in it, still not looking, and pulled out a white, bloody marble. A big marble, the size of my hand, and my body panned out. I saw the gorilla laughing, and then I saw my family's ghosts. They were looking at me. I was still standing up, but I couldn't control my body. I then lost control of my ghost. I was just a floating head now. Then, suddenly, I started laughing, very slowly with open eyes. It was like I had half control of my body, and then everything went black, and I woke up. Whoa. So being forced to watch, so you feel helpless about a situation, and the situation seems to be helpless about the prospect of protecting your family. That's what I would take from that. I was a bit curious about the line, I was feeling dizzy like I just drank blood. There's just a little hole in your ribs. Weird. I wonder what the marble could represent. But it does seem like you died alongside your family, which is also interesting. Don't know what the gorilla could represent. Could be you're just like afraid of gorillas, something of that nature. I mean, they're definitely not the most harmless animals. Interesting though, yeah. I mean, obviously, like the bottom line in terms of what I can interpret from this dream is just a fear, not a fear. The fact that you're having, seeing your family dead and that you're unable to do anything about it and that your body is moving on its own, those things all suggest that you have a fear of not being able to protect your family. So that's sort of the bottom line there. And there was one other thing that I just remembered that I wanted to say about that tentacles from the sky nightmare, which is that it said, if you look at my premonitory dreams presentation, which I believe was episode 8 or something, it said of vivid dreams that those are the ones that tend to predict the future. So just a fun little idea, maybe you're foreseeing the alien attack in, 2023 or something of that nature, where the tentacle monster come out of the sky and everyone's being chased by spider monsters. Probably have time for one more. Didn't get a viewer submission this week. If you'd like me to read your nightmare, send it as an email to theforgottengrove@gmail.com, and I'll check that out next week. This looks promising. Maybe a Harambe thing. Yeah, hard to say. A fear of Harambe. Yeah, maybe he's the kid that got pulled around by Harambe. And here he is writing a nightmare about it. Anyway. I'm going to try the music. No, I'm not going to try that. I'll try it next week. This is a post by a user named Kirby Sleep. The post is titled, "I think he's after me." The post reads, "Recently, I've been having the same vivid nightmare a couple nights a week, but each time the storyline's progressed. It happens at my mom's house with my mom, my sister, my cat, and me. It first started off with my sister and I hearing and seeing somebody at night, and when we opened the curtains in my room, we saw writing on the window with both our physical descriptions. That one didn't faze me much, but recently they've gotten so bad. My sister and I started riding bikes, and halfway through this man kidnapped me. Somehow, I miraculously escaped and rode home. Later on, my neighbor across the street told my sister that she had the same window writing, and she saw a tall man write it, so she knew it wasn't us. So at this point, we're locking our windows, doors, everything. We even covered the vents and pretended like we're rearranging our rooms just in case. Eventually, I looked at the writing, and it said Catherine Neifeliad, which just says, "Daniel, find Catherine. My name is not Catherine, and neither is my sister's." Finally, it was nighttime, so I wake up in the dream to a hand holding my cat, trying to take it out the window. So I freak out, try to call the police to no avail, and stop grabbing and scratching the hand so I could get their DNA, but he started choking me, threatening to kill me until I woke up in real life. I don't know what it means or how to stop it, but I'm scared he's about to kill MD. I think that's supposed to mean me. Interesting. So it could be a serial killer or just a stalker. Maybe you have someone in real life that you're concerned might fit that role a little too well. Otherwise, it could be that you're watching a lot of crime dramas, because it does seem to be written in that very kind of like interesting storytelling sort of narrative. Do I not have anything else to say about this? It might be the case that I have nothing else to say about this. And you know what? I think that's okay, because I think we're a bit out of time anyway. I hope you enjoyed that small bit of an interpretation I had there. Again, as I said, if you've got a nightmare that you'd like me to read, send it as an email to theforgottengrove@gmail.com, and I'll read it at the end of next week's stream. The topic for next week, not entirely sure yet. I did want to do one about things that were similar to, I think, what was just mentioned in that previous nightmare. So about nightmares that pick up where they left off. I think that could be an interesting topic. Also, I've been reaching out to more people to try to do more interviews. I reached out to about 6 people this week, but unfortunately, I had a lot of interest, but nothing really came through. But I'm still looking to interview someone with night terrors, sleep paralysis, sleepwalking, narcolepsy. If you have any of those, or you know someone that has those and you'd like to be interviewed, feel free to also give me an email at theforgottengrove@gmail.com, and I'd love to interview you. It'd be a lot of fun. And subscribe, hit the bell, hit the like button, all that good stuff. And until next time, embrace the beautiful dark.